Daf Yomi, Tractate Zevachim, page 15a, top of the page, with the words Efshar litakona or lo efshar litakona. The Gemara asks, if the blood was conveyed by hand, is it possible to correct it by conveying it again properly, or is it not possible to correct it and the offering is disqualified permanently? Toshima, come in here, a proof from the aforementioned Mishnah. If a priest fit for the temple service collected the blood in a vessel and gave the vessel to an unfit person standing next to the altar, the latter should return it to the fit priest. Apparently, even after the blood is conveyed in an inappropriate manner, it can be corrected. Unihi nami diachzo akasher yekablenu isol b'zayz v'lo yafshelet hakona ifselala. And though one can indeed explain that the fit priest should then receive it from him, as posited above, if it enters your mind that if the blood is conveyed incorrectly, it is not possible to correct it, the offering was already disqualified when the priest gave the blood to the unfit person. Taking it back is of no consequence. Mi savar deka zal gavai la deka zal barai. The Gemara rejects this inference. Do you maintain that this is referring to a case where the non-priest is standing inside between the fit priest and the altar? No. It is a case where the non-priest is standing outside, farther away from the altar than the priest. Therefore, when the priest gave him the blood, he was not conveying it toward the altar at all. He was moving it farther away from the altar. Itmar, Amar Ula, Amar Yochanan, Olacha Shilo Baregel Pesula, Alma La Efshar Litakona. It was stated, Ula says, that Rabbi Yochanan says, conveying the blood not by foot renders the offering unfit. Apparently, it is not possible to correct it, and as otherwise, Rabbi Yochanan would have merely stated that it is not considered conveying, as in his earlier statement, 14b. Rav Nachman raised an objection to Ula from a Mishnah on 32a. If the blood spilled from the vessel onto the floor, and one collected it from the floor, it is maybe the ground, right? Because the temple's the ground, the floor, ground, whatever. It says floor here, but I think ground is it's just the plain earth, but it was stone floor maybe. Anyway, if the blood spilled from the vessel on the floor and one collected it from the floor, it is fit for a sacrifice. Apparently, although spilling the blood on the floor constitutes not valid conveying toward the altar, it can still be corrected after the fact. The Gemara explains, here we are dealing with a case where the blood that spilled went outward, meaning away from the altar, so it did not constitute conveying at all. The Gemara asks, can spilled blood go outward and not come inward? Clearly, spilled blood spreads to all sides. The Gemara answers, it is a case where the blood spilled on an inclined plane, and it therefore spilled only outward, away from the altar. And if you wish, say, instead, that it spilled into a hole in the ground, so it did not spread in any direction. And if you wish, say, instead, that it is a case where the blood is thick, so it did not spread in all directions. ועוד עדתני בידך פרקין נשפך על הרצפה והספו פסול לפלוג בדידי במה דברים אמורים כשיוצא לחוץ אבל נכנס לפנים פסול תיובתא. The Gemara asks, but did the Tana go to all that trouble just to teach us all these unlikely cases? And furthermore, rather than teaching in another chapter, C25a, that if the blood spilled from the animal's neck onto the floor and one collected it in a vessel from the floor, it is unfit, let the Mishnah teach a distinction within the case where the blood spilled from the vessel itself. In what case is this statement that the blood is fit said? In a case where the spilled blood went outward away from the altar, but if it came inward, it is unfit. The Gemara concludes, this is a conclusive refutation. If the blood conveyed in a not valid manner, it can be corrected. Itmal, it was said, stated. The dispute in the Mishnah 13a between Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis as to whether improper intent while conveying the blood disqualifies the offering is only with regard to conveying the blood, but not by foot. With regard to greater conveying, meaning conveying the blood by moving the feet, everyone agrees that if one performs it with prohibited intent, the offering is unfit. When they disagree, it is with regard to lesser conveying, meaning the conveying the blood by hand without moving the feet, in a case where the offering was slaughtered next to the altar. Rabbi Shimon hechi mishkachas la idechashiva la mekavadil pok dam lo kulumhi v'yosar denafik dam it avida le mitzvato. They laughed at this statement in the West, in Eretz Yisrael, saying, but if so, one encounters difficulty with regard to a bird sin offering, which is killed through pinching its nape on the altar and whose blood is sprinkled directly from its neck. It is known that if one sprinkled its blood with prohibited intent, the offering is unfit. And according to Rabbi Shimon, who holds that prohibited intent while conveying the blood by hand does not disqualify the offering, how can you find these circumstances if the priest has prohibited intent with regard to the offering before the blood comes out of the bird? This intent is nothing. Since his waving, it is like conveying by hand. And if he has such intent after the blood came out, his mitzvah was already performed as the blood already reached the altar. My kushya dilma midefaresh vi'ad dimtan mizbeach. The Gemara asks, what is the difficulty? Perhaps the offering is disqualified due to prohibited intent from the moment the blood leaves the bird until the moment it reaches the altar. This is as Rabbi Yirmiyah asked Rabbi Zera, if the priest was sprinkling the blood, and the hand of the one sprinkling was served before the blood reached the airspace of the altar, what is the halacha? Is the sprinkling not valid since it was performed by a blemished priest, or is valid because the blood left the bird before he was blemished. And Rabbi Zera said to him, it is not valid. What is the reason? We require that the verse end sprinkle of the blood, Leviticus 4:6, be fulfilled in the same manner as the verse that follows it. And the priest shall place of the blood upon the corners of the altar, Leviticus 4:7, namely, that the blood reach the altar. Therefore the blood can be disqualified any time it reaches the altar, whether through the priest becoming unblemished or through prohibited intent. Ki asu papa v'avuna bered Rav Yehoshua mi beira Rabri haynu chukcha uvehoilocha rabosi noi pligi ve'aki pligi ve'oilocha rabosi pligi. When Rav Papa and Rav Huna, son of Rav Yehoshua, came from the study hall, they said, "This is the reason for the laughter of the scholars of Eretz Yisrael. With regard to greater conveying, meaning conveying by foot, can one say Rabbi Shimon and the rabbis do not disagree? Clearly, when they disagree in the Mishnah, they disagree with regard to greater conveying, as Rabbi Shimon reasons that conveying is a dispensable rite. Only conveying by foot is dispensable, since even if the offering is slaughtered next to the altar, the priest will need to move its blood somewhat with his hand. Rather, the statement under discussion should be amended to say, with regard to lesser conveying, meaning conveying the blood by hand, everyone agrees that it does not disqualify the offering due to prohibited intent. When they disagree, it is with regard to greater conveying, meaning conveying the blood for a distance by foot. Rabbi Shimon holds that improper intent, even then, does not disqualify the offering, as the rite is indispensable, and the rabbis maintain that it does disqualify it. If a non-priest conveyed the blood to the altar, and a priest returned it to its original location, and a priest then conveyed it again to the altar, the sons of Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Yama disagree with regard to the halacha. One says that the offering is fit, and one says it is unfit. This is because one sage holds that if the blood is conveyed improperly, it is possible to correct it, and one sage holds that it is not possible to correct it. If a priest conveyed it to the altar and then returned it, and the non-priest then conveyed it again, Rav Shimon Rashi says, according to the statement of the one who deems the offering fit, in the previous case, where the non-priest conveyed it the first time, and the priest conveyed it the second time, in this case, the offering is unfit, as a non-priest conveyed it the second time. According to the statement of the one who deems the offering unfit, in the previous case, as a non-priest conveyed it the first time, in this case, where a priest conveyed it the first time, he deems the offering fit. Rava says, "Af lidivre apostle pasul, my time when you tzorich liamtoi." Turning to 15b now for the word lamtoi. Rava says, even according to the statement of the one who deems the offering unfit in the case where a non-priest conveyed it the first time, it is unfit in this case as well, where a priest conveyed it the first time and a non-priest conveyed it the second time. What is the reason? Because after the blood is returned to its original location, it is necessary to bring it again. Therefore, the second conveying must also be performed by a priest. Top of 15b, the first word in the line is v'lo toye, meaning to bring it again. Therefore, the second conveying must also be performed by a priest. Continuing on to 15b, after the break, God willing. Continuing on Daf 15b, top of the page with the words Amar le Rav Yirmi Rav Ashi. Amar le Rav Yirmi Rav Ashi, Hafi Amar Rav Yirmi B'diftim, Ha'ifsich lam toeh, Achloikes Rabbi Elozor V'Rabbonon. Rabbi Yirmiyah said to Rav Ashi, this is what Rav Yirmiyah of Difti said when he stated that it is necessary to bring the blood to the altar again, and that therefore the second conveying is considered a sacrificial rite and must be performed by a priest. He meant that this principle is subject to a dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and the rabbis. Ditznan Rabbi Elazar Omer Hamirhalach bimkom tzarich lahalech machshava poseles ma kam shein tzarich lahalech im machshava poseles. This is, as we learned in the Mishnah in 13a, Rabbi Eliezer says, I don't know if they see Rabbi Eliezer, and in the English, and then in the Hebrew, it's Elazar. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer. I mean, they're printing it Elazar. So maybe it's Rabbi Eliezer. Just a mistake. Okay, so let's go for Rabbi Eliezer then. It's L-E, or is it L? It's hard to tell. Whoever it is, Rabbi Eliezer or Elazar. With regard to one who conveys the blood in a situation where he is required to convey it, a prohibited intent while conveying disqualifies the offering. If he conveys the blood in a situation where he is not required to convey it, prohibited intent while conveying, it does not disqualify the offering. זהו הילוך שצורך להלך, קיבלו בפנים והוציאו לחוץ. זהו הילוך שאין צורך להלך. And Rava says, all of the Tanaim concede that if one collected the blood outside, meaning at a distance from the altar, and he brought it inside, close to the altar, that is considered necessary conveying. If one collected it inside and took it outside, that is considered unnecessary conveying. לא נחלקו אלא כשהכניסו וחזר והוציאו, מה סבר? הצריך להמתויה, ומה סבר עליו? כי הילוך הצורך לעבוד אדומים. They disagree with regard to a case where he brought it in and took it out again. One sage, the first Tana, holds that since it is necessary to bring it back to the altar, it is considered necessary conveying, and permitted intent while performing it disqualifies the offering. And one sage, Rabbi Eliezer, holds that since the rite of conveying to the altar was already performed, it is not considered conveying that is necessary for the sacrificial service, and prohibited intent while performing it does not disqualify the offering. And one sage, Rabbi Eliezer, holds, I guess it was Rabbi Eliezer. In Hebrew they write Elazar, and in English they write Rabbi Eliezer. So I don't even know. Anyway, and once, I think it's probably Eliezer, if it's the sages, Eliezer. I don't remember the Talmud or Elazar. One sage, Rabbi Eliezer, holds that since the rite of conveying to the altar was already performed, it is not considered conveying that it is necessary for the sacrificial service, and prohibited intent while performing it does not disqualify the offering. Apparently, the same dispute applies to a case where a non-priest conveyed the blood the second time. Eis ve'abaye Rabbi Eliezer Omer Rabbi Halach Makom Shitzach Lahalech Machshov B'Seres Ketzad Kiblu B'chos V'chis Lefnim Zeu Hiluk Shitzorich Lahalech Kiblu Yifnim V'os Yelechus Zeu Hiluk Shein Tzorich Lelech V'chazar V'chnis Hiluk Shitzorich Lahalechu. Abaye raised an objection to Rabbi's interpretation from a Braita. Rabbi Eliezer says, with regard to one who conveys the blood, in a situation where he is required to convey it, prohibited intent while conveying it disqualifies the offering. How so? If one collected the blood outside, at a distance from the altar, and he brought it inside, close to the altar, that is considered necessary conveying. If one collected it inside and took it outside, that is considered unnecessary conveying, and consequently one infers that if he brought it in again, it is considered necessary conveying, even according to Rabbi Eliezer. Amar le, Itanya, Tanya. Rabbi said to him, if this price is taught, it's taught, and I cannot disagree with it. We have completed. We shall return to you. Zevachim. And now moving on to the next perek. Okay. Zevachim shekiblu damon zo. Is this perek also called Zevachim? Alright, that's what the Mishnah says. Kol Zevachim shekiblu damon zo onen tehul yom mechus al kippurim mechus v'godim shelo yirochatz yadayim v'raglayim ol tomei yoyishevayim al gabe kelim al gabe behema al gabe raglayim pasal. With regard to all slaughtered offerings, if the one who collected their blood was a non-priest, or a priest who was an acute mourner, meaning one whose relative has died and has not yet been buried, or one who was ritually impure, who immersed that day and was waiting for nightfall for the purification process to be completed, or one who has not yet brought an atonement offering, for example, a zav or a leper after the seventh day of purification, of the purification process, or a priest lacking the requisite priestly vestments, or one who did not wash his hands and feet from the water in the basin prior to performing temple service, or an uncircumcised priest, or a ritually impure priest, or if the one who collected the blood was sitting, or if he was standing not on the floor of the temple, but upon vessels, or upon an animal, or upon the feet of another, he has disqualified the offering. If he collected the blood with his left hand, he disqualified the blood for offering. In the last case, Rabbi Shimon deems it fit. That's the Mishnah. Now the Talmud, the Gemara says, Zar minan, Titani Levi, Daber el Aharon v'el banav lemo, v'nazru mikrat shebnei Yisrael v'gomer, bnei Yisrael b'rimai, le'benavot v'nashim, kol b'nashim t'mazakoi. From where do we derive that a non-priest who performs sacrificial rites disqualifies the offering? As Levi teaches, the verse states, "Speak to Aaron and to his sons that they separate themselves from the sacred items of the children of Israel." Leviticus 22, verse 2. Levi continues, the children of Israel serves to exclude that. The children of Israel, those words, serves to exclude what from the prohibition against sacrificing an offering in a state of impurity. If we say that it serves to exclude the offering of women, and the verse states b'nei in the masculine to indicate the sons of the daughters, is it conceivable that an offering of women is sacrificed in a state of impurity? Rather, Perhaps it serves to exclude the offerings of Gentiles. By the way, I'm just saying, I always make this disclaimer when controversial material, the Talmud against Gentiles or against, have to do with, sexual stuff, with women, whatever. I'm making a disclaimer, I am only reading the Talmud. I don't advocate, I don't agree or disagree, certainly don't agree with most of these cases with what the Talmud is saying. I am simply reading the Talmud. Statement made. Rather, perhaps it serves to exclude offering Gentiles. Now, if the front plate is of the high priest, which normally affects acceptance for offerings of Jews, sacrificed in a state of impurity, does not affect acceptance for the offerings of Gentiles, as the Master said, and with regard to an offering of Gentiles, whether it was offered in a state of impurity unintentionally or intentionally, it was not accepted. Can it be, then, that such an offering is sacrificed in a state of purity ab initio? Okay. Rather, this is what the verse is saying. Meaning, it should be read in the following manner, that they separate themselves from the sacred items, the children of Israel, and that they not profane my holy name. That is, the verse states that they, the priests, must separate themselves from the sacred items when they are ritually impure, and that the children of Israel must separate themselves from performing the sacrificial rites, so that they will not profane, meaning disqualify the offerings. The Tana of the school of Rabbi Yishmael taught the halacha of a non-priest who performs the sacrificial rites is derived via an a fortiori inference from the case of a blemished priest. Just as with regard to a blemished priest who may partake of the meat offerings, if he performs sacrificial rites, he has nevertheless desecrated the service.